140 chickens get processed every minute in most poultry plants in the U.S. That's the maximum speed the U.S. government allows most poultry plants to run their assembly lines. It's a speed that helps chicken companies stay profitable. But if you ask poultry workers, they'll say it's a speed that causes them pain.
Te despierta el dolor, o como que te están clavando agujas en los dedos.
Meat processing is a dangerous job in America. Workers are 3 times more likely to get seriously injured than the average American worker, more likely to get seriously injured than people who work in oil and gas drilling, industrial building construction, or people who operate sawmills. And that was before the COVID pandemic tore through meat plants. Meat processing has a long history of safety issues. Using a sharp tool quickly and close to other people is dangerous, but some of the harm is avoidable because today workers are without some basic protections necessary to keep them safe. So why has the U.S. failed to protect the people who process our meat? Meat processing refers to the stages of turning a live animal into a food product in a factory. For poultry, a factory layout might look something like this. Workers hang live chickens by their feet on a conveyor belt, where machines stun them, cut their throats, defeather them, remove their heads and feet, and take out their guts. Then their carcasses are sanitized with an acid solution before they get stored in a cooler. This slaughtering section is almost entirely automated, and it's the fastest part of the line. But what happens next still requires human precision. Unless they are sold as whole chickens, workers cut up the carcasses into parts by hand. This process is called deboning. That's the job this worker has. She works at a poultry plant in northwest Arkansas and requested to remain anonymous for fear of retaliation from her company. She's worked in poultry processing for over 20 years, and it's how she met her husband, who died last year from COVID after the virus spread through poultry plants in the area.
Debone es una línea de muchos, como de 12 o 10 personas. De primero se baja el hombro, después se baja el ala, después se jala la pechuga para abajo, después se jala a la pechuga para una máquina donde quita el cuero, después se sigue el proceso de quitar de rayar los tenders. Por último ya se quitan los tenders de la línea.
Deboning work is extremely repetitive. She's making those motions thousands of times a day. A 2014 CDC report found that 34% of workers suffer from carpal tunnel syndrome, and 76% of workers had nerve disorders when working at standard speeds. These conditions make the finger joints enlarged and stiff, and give workers wrist pain, like these photos of poultry workers' hands show.
Ya se me caen las cosas de las manos. Tengo un vaso, un sartén, se me cae. A veces hasta las llaves se me caen de las manos. Incluso en la línea se me caen los cuchillos.
Pace, repetition, and musculoskeletal disorders also increase the odds of more severe injuries, which is why the poultry industry has more reports of finger amputations than any other industry, and why the meat processing industry as a whole averages 2 amputations a week. Americans eat a lot more meat per capita today than we did in the 60s, but we actually eat less beef and just a little more pork. It's because we eat a lot more chicken. One reason is because chicken is comparatively cheap. It's less than half the cost of pork or beef. If a meat processing company wants to keep these prices low and its profits high, they can adjust their output. In other words, they can try to produce more chicken with the same cost of labor. That can be achieved through faster slaughter line speeds. The U.S. Department of Agriculture regulates meat processing line speeds, but it's primarily concerned with food safety. Another agency, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, regulates worker safety, but doesn't have the power to set line speed limits. Line speeds affect both food and worker safety, but regulating them through the USDA means worker safety risks may be overlooked.
It's based on food safety standards. It does not consider the effect on workers at all.
In 2001, an OSHA ergonomics rule went into effect, aimed at reducing injuries caused by a worker performing a repetitive task, which could have empowered the agency to regulate line speeds. But within a year, Congress axed the rule after business groups argued the standards were too costly. Today, the National Chicken Council, the lobby that represents the poultry industry, routinely asks the U.S. government to increase the maximum line speed. Starting in 2018, the USDA granted waivers to at least 54 plants to increase their line speeds from 140 birds per minute to 175. These 15 plants received those line speed increases in 2020, even though all but one had been previously cited for worker safety violations and for severe injuries, according to a report by the National Employment Law Project. Evidence that worker safety may not have been a consideration when allowing faster speeds.
Humans are not machines, and there's just a limit to human capacity for some of these repetitive motions.
It's not just line speeds that fall into this gap in regulatory oversight. It's also why the amount of chemicals used to prevent foodborne illness, like peracetic acid, ammonia, and chlorine, aren't regulated for worker safety. Chemical accidents like ammonia and chlorine gas leaks injure hundreds of workers a year, and they frequently make workers sick.
Cuando entro ahí en todo el área de trabajo, se me duerme la lengua, se me reseca la boca por eso. Los ojos le lloran a uno y duele mucho la cabeza. Y yo ahí el dolor de cabeza ya no se me quita, todo el tiempo lo tengo ya.
Absent stricter government regulation to protect them, workers may feel like they have only one other option: unionization. But that's become out of reach for most workers.
It's a mess.
Magali Licoli organizes non-unionized poultry workers in Northwest Arkansas through an organization called Venceremos. She's digging through her storage container to find protest signs.
This was when we were telling them to shut down the factories because of the outbreaks.
This part of the country is crucial for poultry production. These 3 counties in Arkansas process more poultry than almost anywhere in the U.S., and multiple poultry companies have plants here, including Tyson, one of the largest poultry-producing companies in the world, which has its corporate headquarters here in Springdale, Arkansas. That's where Magali is headed, to deliver a petition in protest of working conditions at a poultry plant also located in Springdale.
Workers have been complaining a lot. The working conditions have gotten worse, even worse than the pandemic. There's less workers, and workers have to work faster, and the salary was the same.
The petition asks for a $4 an hour wage increase, no restrictions on bathroom and water breaks, more frequent short breaks, and paid sick leave. When we reached out to Tyson for this story, they wrote that they have no reason to deny breaks to workers and claimed the petition was misrepresented to the workers who signed it. Venceremos organizes poultry workers from other companies in the area who have had similar complaints, like this strike at a George's poultry plant in Springdale, Arkansas. The work that Magali's organization does is important in a state like Arkansas, where the vast majority of poultry workers don't have access to a union. Unions have historically made dangerous jobs, like slaughterhouses, a little safer. But in the 1980s, union power declined, in part due to a rise in anti-union politics. Those trends hit the meat industry too.
Unions once played a really important watchdog role in both maintaining a wage floor across the industry and maintaining safety standards.
Pork and beef processing companies shuttered unionized plants located in urban areas and reopened non-union plants in rural areas. To meet this skyrocketing demand for chicken starting in the 80s, the poultry industry set up large plants in rural areas too. Arkansas and other top poultry-producing states have anti-union laws and have some of the lowest union membership in the country. Meat processing workers are about twice as likely to be a person of color, to not be a citizen, and to be foreign-born when compared to the total workforce.
The majority of the workers working in the Northwest Arkansas are from Central America, a lot of people from Mexico, but also one of the biggest populations is people from the Marshall Islands.
When unions began to decline between 1980 and 1990, injuries in the meatpacking sector rose by 40%. Since then, government data shows that injuries have declined, a statistic the National Chicken Council shows on their site, and roughly the same one they gave us when we reached out to them for comment. But there's a debate about how reliable that data is.
There's a lot of evidence that shows reporting is down considerably. There are a lot of worker-led and advocate-led surveys that show persistent high levels of injury.
One of these surveys was given to Alabama poultry workers. 72% of them said they suffered from significant work-related injury or illness. That's compared to 4.5% in the government's data on the whole country from that same year.
What motivates you to keep doing this work?
Because I've seen workers suffering, all these years. They had accidents, injuries that left them disabled for life. If they have babies, sometimes it's hard for them to hold them because of the issues that they have in their hands.
The poultry industry could make these workers' lives a little easier and, importantly, safer by making modifications to this line, like reducing the speed, giving workers more breaks, or minimizing repetition by switching up job roles. Paid sick leave is another improvement, and Tyson recently announced they would start offering this benefit to workers in 2022, but only the vaccinated ones. For now, Magali continues her fight on behalf of workers.
We have the Allied Consumer Petitions wrapped up in those trays. I will encourage everyone to help us to carry the petitions in the tray and walk all the way to see if Tyson will receive the petition.
We went outside the Tyson headquarters. The director of public relations was there to receive the petitions. I think that people really need to take into consideration that without these workers, we don't have food in our table, and that's just facts. It's just not only about the humanity, but the moral duties that we have to these workers.
Anymore and stop! No!
Hi, thanks for watching this second episode of our Future Perfect series on the meat industry. Something that didn't make it into this story is the impact that this book had. This is The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. It's a novel that was published in 1906 about the misfortunes of a Lithuanian family who immigrate to the US to work in Chicago's meatpacking industry. It was a bestseller of its day and it was hugely influential. Theodore Roosevelt, who was the president at the time, even credited the book for inspiring him to pass the first food safety regulation in the US. But Sinclair apparently had hoped that the focus would have been more on the workers and the animals who were suffering in this system. I talked to Claire Kellaway about this.
Sinclair, the author of The Jungle, will often say, I was aiming for readers' hearts and hit them in the stomach.